So I can't believe that the second quarter of the year has already passed us by. Wow, time is flying. So today I'm going to do the top 5 books of quarter 2 of 2019. So stick around to see what they were. Well, hey friends, Roger here, and welcome to my channel, Roger's Reads. So today I'm doing my quarterly wrap-up where I choose the top 5 books or sometimes 6, that I read during the past quarter. So for those of you who like a little bit of stats, here's some from the last quarter. So I ended up reading 84 books so far this year, and 41 of those were during the last quarter, which is about right, half. I read 18 adult books and 23 young adult, 12 contemporary, 6 fantasy, 5 urban fantasy, 1 historical fiction, 5 thrillers, 3 literary fiction, 1 mystery, 1 magical realism, 3 nonfiction, 2 LGBT romance, and 3 science fiction. So of those books, 27 of the authors were female, 11 were male, and 1 non-binary, and there was 1 collaboration with both a male and a female author. And as for format, I read 6 audiobooks, 13 ebooks, 1 graphic novel, 13 hardcover, and 8 paperbacks. So there you are. So on to the books. So 3 of the books on my list were actually books that I read during the month of June. So June turned out to be an excellent reading month. So the first book on my list, and this isn't necessarily in any order, is The Midnight at the Tuscany Hotel by James Markert. So this story follows a man named Vittorio Gandhi, once a gifted painter who is now a World War II veteran, so yes, it's historical fiction, who has just returned from the war with severe PTSD. So Vittorio has a photographic memory, and now he just cannot erase the heinous and disturbing war atrocities that he witnessed during his time in the service, and they're just stuck in his mind. So now home, both his wife and his son are pretty much frightened of him due to his erratic and oftentimes violent behavior. So to add to his stress level, he discovers that during his time in the war, the mind of his father, Robert Gandhi, has been taken over by Alzheimer's, and he now no longer even recognizes Vittorio. Now it's worth mentioning that his father used to run the renowned Tuscany Hotel. So in its glory days, the hotel was a place where artists of all kinds, actors, musicians, writers, even engineers, would find inspiration. But now the hotel has been closed for several years following a tragic event. So one night, Robert disappears, and Vittorio guesses that the only place that his father could have gone would be the hotel. So sure enough, Vittorio finds his father there, but something has drastically changed. Robert is now completely lucid. His mind is sharp and sound, his memories completely intact. So Vittorio was like, what? Now Robert claims that it was the water of the hotel's fountain that restored him. Vittorio then learns that Robert has decided to reopen the hotel and has already invited others suffering from memory loss to come. And then all sorts of interesting events follow. So as I've often mentioned, I love themes surrounding memories and the mysteries of the mind. So we have characters in this story. One character who remembers everything, another who is unable to make any new memories at all, and yet another who has lost their memories due to disease. So really, this was such a beautiful story about artists and their muses, about memories lost, memories found again, and the truths behind myths and legends. So yes, this one made my top 5. So the next book is The Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. So this is the second book in the Strange the Dreamer's duology, with the first being Strange the Dreamer. And this story immediately picks up where the first book left off after the wake of a tragedy, and we're immediately thrust right into conflict. Now, all of our characters, both the human and the god spawn, have to figure out how they fit into this new world and how they are to prevent the destruction of Weep due to someone's single-minded focus on vengeance. And then a new enemy who's also intent on vengeance arrives. And with this enemy comes answers to many of the questions that we all wondered about in the first book. So the world building here in this book is epic, massive, detailed, and absolutely phenomenal as we delve into multiple worlds and dimensions in this story, all of them related. You know, I was amazed by the many unexpected directions that the story went in, and the author gives us surprise after surprise after surprise. And the book was also beautifully written with lush lyrical prose that stayed with me long after I finished it and made reading this book such a rich experience. And I felt that the storytelling here was unparalleled. So I definitely hope Laini Taylor writes more in this world, because if she does, I'm right there. So the next book on my list was a book that I just mentioned during my June wrap-up, and that was entitled Recursion by Blake Crouch. So when I heard that this book was about an affliction that drove people mad with memories that they never lived, I was right there, because I love books about memory and timelines, as I just mentioned. So the affliction of this story is called false memory syndrome and leads up to a lot of people committing suicide as a result. So our story follows two people, Barry Sutton, who's a New York City cop whose teenage daughter was killed years before, and Helena Smith, a neuroscientist who is trying to find a way to restore memories in Alzheimer's, mainly because her mother is suffering from Alzheimer's. So both of them are trying to figure out what the hell is going on with this false memory syndrome stuff, and their paths eventually cross and converge. So in the search for the truth about what's going on, Barry and Helena discover that the whole false memory thing is causing the whole fabric of society to unravel as it becomes increasingly difficult to tell reality from these false memories. So this is really a mind-bending science fiction story that was one hell of a wild ride. It's a great example of what happens when Pandora's box is thrust wide open. You know, what I especially loved about it was that it was so twisty and turny that I never quite knew where this story was going to head next. Now, I went into this basically knowing practically nothing about it, which made it all the more fun to read. And if you decide to read it, try not to read too much about it beforehand. So yeah, phenomenal book. The next book on my list is We Contain Multitudes by Sarah Henstra. So this is another book that I read in June, and it follows two high school students, Jonathan and Adam, who are paired in a pen pal assignment in which they have to write each other weekly letters, physical letters. So through these weekly letters, we learned more about the two boys. It's through these letters that we learned about the emotionally complex struggles that each of them is going through in their daily lives, as well as the physical danger that each of them is facing. So not surprising, they end up falling in love with each other. But unfortunately, love is not going to be easy for these two extremely complex characters, each with their own set of mysteries, difficulties, and messy lives. So this was such an emotional roller coaster of a book. You know, at times I was smiling and felt super happy for our guys, but then other times my heart broke for them. But though it's sad and heartbreaking in places, it's also restorative and hopeful, and I thought that this was a hauntingly beautiful story. And I highly recommend it. So the next book on my list was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuisto, and I just talked about this in my June wrap-up as well. So this is a delightful and heartwarming romantic comedy that revolves around the fictional Democratic presidential first family, with the president being President Ellen Claremont. So the story follows her son, the first son, Alex Claremont Diaz, and his nemesis, Prince Henry of Wales. So after an incident at the royal wedding involving Henry and Alex, which threatens the American and British relations, the presidential administration comes up with a plan for damage control. staging a fake friendship with Alex and Henry, which involves them attending functions together, visiting each other in their respective countries, basically hanging out and being seen together as much as possible in an attempt to convince the world that they are actually the best of friends rather than the enemies that they are in real life. So of course, we can guess what happens. The two of them fall in love and end up in a clandestine relationship. So the pressure is on to keep it a secret, the relationship, especially given that Alex's mother is kicking off her re-election bid. And of course, Henry across the pond is expected to uphold his duties of the throne. And not to mention the fact that a homosexual relationship between the USA president's son and the English prince would have huge political consequences. So there's also a lot of other things that are going on here beneath the surface, rendering the story even more compelling. So one of my favorite tropes is the enemies to lovers trope, and this one did not disappoint. But what I really loved about this novel was the banter and the one-liners between Henry and Alex in their emails and text. I mean, oh my God, their dialogue was laugh out loud funny, as well as incredibly moving. So yeah, another book that I highly recommend. And I'm going to include one more book as an honorable mention, which is entitled Where I End and You Begin. So first off, I'll mention that I love the body swapping trope, and some of my favorite films include 18 Again, Freaky Friday, Big, Vice Versa, 17 Again, etc. So I've read a few body swapping books, and my experience has been that this trope doesn't translate all that well to written form. Body swapping novels often end up frustrating and confusing, so though I was intrigued by the synopsis of this book, I was also a bit hesitant. But I needn't have been, because the author managed to pull it off swimmingly. So the story follows a somewhat shy young man named Ezra who is obsessed with a girl named Imogen and is working up his nerve to ask her to the prom. The only problem is Imogen's overly protective best friend Winona, a loud and annoying girl who has made Ezra's life miserable for as long as he can remember, and actually seems to derive enjoyment from tormenting Ezra whenever possible. So on the night of the total solar eclipse, something weird happens to Ezra and Winona. They wake up in each other's bodies. But what's especially strange is that they begin randomly swapping back and forth every day. So these two enemies are forced to come together to form an alliance, as they need to pretend to be the person whose embody they're inhabiting. And then there's also the problem of the play that all four of them are in, a rendition of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, in a play in which there's also a bit of a gender swapping, which is part of the story. But what especially worked for me with this book was the hilarity that would ensue if you found yourself not only in the body of the opposite gender, but of someone whose personality is night and day different from yours. And all this taking place while in high school. So yeah, there were plenty of laugh out loud moments in this book, and I thought it was so much fun to journey with Ezra and Winona as they struggle to figure out how to live in each other's bodies and to navigate the challenges associated with the other person's sex and personality. It's a story about how two people manage to find wisdom by being in each other's bodies. So by using a body swap as a tool, the author gets to show the world through the other person's eyes, resulting in a comedic contemporary with a heartfelt emotional relationship between two people who couldn't be more different. I also loved how the author dealt with sexuality in such a unique and interesting way, a way that I haven't come across before in a novel. So all in all, a lovely, subtle, thought-provoking, blow-me-away kind of book that I'm still mulling over. So those were my top 6 books of the last quarter. So that is it. As always, I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all your support. And if you liked this video, please click the like button below, as it really helps my channel out. And that'll do it. I'll talk to you in the next video. Roger and out.